Okay, so just a quick introduction to the week's activities. This week we're going to learn how to paint again, but in a different way. This time we're going to learn using additional tools such as painting with opacity. So you can see by these two versions of the same picture that the one on the right, well, pretty well destroyed, but just to actually outline what can actually be done. So let's start with the eyes. You can see the eyes there and the eyes there. What I've done is I've added a little bit of blue colour, slightly low opacity, say about 10%, and it just gives this hint of bluish in the eyes. Of course, you can play around even further. Same with the lips, slightly a bit more reddish, and in the hair itself I put loads of these sort of streaks, and as I've done them I've sort of tried to go with the actual patterning in the hair as well. Let me just close these down. So there's the version I ended up with. Now if I undo, you can see what's happened stage by stage. We go back through quickly. Okay, so when in the past we've looked at, for example, paintbrush, we've used a standard paintbrush and we've just used the standard sorts of tool settings. We may have reduced the size of the brush in the past, but one of the things which would have been set up originally would have been opacity. Opacity means how much to add of the new color opacity with the original. Now, of course, if I change the opacity down to say 50%, when I'm painting, it will add half new with the half old. So I go for a nice red brush there. In fact, let's go for blue. We'll go for a blue, in fact, nice one there. And if I paint with the blue, it will add half blue with the half red. Now, if I bring the opacity back up to 100%, you can see the difference. And because with blending, we're actually ending up with a blend of colour rather than just a watering of the colour. So you actually can see that the actual colour is blending with the original colour, and therefore the colour itself is changing we're painting with. If I bring the opacity down to say 25%, close enough. When you can get to that sort of amount, not only is it blending quite well, but it can also be used to enhance the original colour within the photograph. So what we're going to do here is, first of all, we're going to make sure we get a brush size of what we wanted, so that's probably okay. We're going to go for some simple streaks in the hair first of all. So I'm going to go with the shape of the hair. So as the hair sort of moves to a certain direction, like in an arc, like here, I'm going to go with those straight streaks. Now I've got the opacity there at 26%. See there, 26%. I'll leave that for now, just to see what that's like. It's not bad. I'll put one or two around. It's not bad. And I'm going to now change the colour, but stick to the same sort of principle. So I'll add some reds maybe. Again, I can play around with maybe the hardness as well as the opacity, just to blend things in quite nicely. Now there's certain things like the cheeks and the lips which I want to sort of enhance the colour of. So while I've got red, let's do that. I'll probably go for a softer brush and basically a smaller brush. So the lips there, so I've got nice and strong red. So that red there is going to be basically washed out. Now, the thing to remember with opacity when you're pasting by default, it only adds a single layer on top. So I can keep on going over the same area, and it only adds one layer. Now if I use Control Z just to undo, hopefully you can see the difference I've done already. That's with one layer of 26% opacity. Now, rather than doing that, you might be wiser sometimes to build up over time a number of layers. So if I go to roughly 10% opacity, and if I put the first layer on, you probably at 10% may not see a big difference. Okay, but then if I let go of the mouse button and click again, that's putting the equivalent now of double what opacity level it was. So it was set to 10%, so I'm now putting on basically about 20% opacity. Now if I just undo the first, undo brings me to 10%, the second undo takes me to natural. So I can use that then to build up. Now of course I can keep adding on top until I know it's too much. So I'm going to add a third layer, which is going to be the equivalent of 30%, which I know is going to be too strong. But I can tell then by when using undo, that's going to be equivalent to 20%, undo again, that's the original. Oh no, that's the original. There we go. So I can decide them using Control Y to look at the different videos and decide which one I'm happiest with. I'm thinking about 20%. Same with the eyes. I can literally make the eyes bluer just by painting with opacity. So I've got a nice bluish colour. If I go for a slightly smaller brush size. Okay. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to paint up the first eye on the left at 10%. So I'm just going to give it one layer of 10%. I'm just giving it over and over just to make sure I get all the area. It's not actually going to build up at all. Now I'm happy with that, but just to double check, I don't want more. I'm going to give it another layer, another 10%. And again, I can go for a third layer. So that's going to be equivalent to 30% opacity and all. So adding 1/3 new paint on the old. And then I can use Control Z to undo till I get it so it's natural. So again, that's the original, which actually has a bit of a green tint to the original image there. But that's 10%, that's 20%, which I think tiny little bit too much, maybe just 10%. It's a bit in between really, so I could possibly bring the opacity down to 5% and add another layer, giving it a combination of about 50%. So I'm happy with that. So I think 15% works well. So I'll put the opacity back to 15, or up to 15%, and I'll work on the other. Okay. Now again, use Control Z. That's the original. Control Y. And you can see the difference. And you can do the same with other things, like for example the cheeks. I can bring up the nice rosiness of the cheeks. Okay, probably a bigger brush on this occasion. So I can go bring the cheeks in. So I've just changed the colour, I've not changed the opacity. So I've not actually done a lot of a blend there, but if I use Control Z, you can see straight away that's the original. That's the new version, which I'm happier with. I know I'm ruining this. I mean, obviously in the fashion industry, they take a little bit more time and care. That gives me that as well. So there you go. So when you are basically wishing to enhance an image, one of the options you will have is literally to give it a slight cast of a different colour by painting with opacity. So hopefully, although as I say, the photograph, to be fair, is pretty well ruined by these changes, but hopefully you can see the effect